my fellow citizens of all nations. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit special book because I used to be sort of obsessed with this book, and this book is sort of very special in that sense that in terms of books of Bible, if we look at all of them, the book of Ecclesiastes is so much more different from other books of Bible. And when we read Ecclesiastes, we see sort of deep philosophical view toward life. And there is no much positivity in this book, or not much talk about divine justice. It's just observation and lamenting of the author, where he complains and condemns life, and in fact directly says that God sort of created Son of Man just to like mock them because life is pointless for author, and author sees countless suffering and is not sort of he at some point kind of tells us that maybe God will do something about it, but at the same time says that, well, these people are suffering and what to do. And also, another important thing is that I'm just using the word Ecclesiastes, author, and there's a common sort of fairy tale about the author of the book. Many people actually, but not many, but the popular belief about the book of Ecclesiastes is that it is written by King Solomon. But it is not true. In fact, this is just derives from idea that in Ecclesiastes, author himself says that I'm a son of David, etc., from this house, and I was king in Jerusalem. But he could have been saying this for poetic purpose, and at the same time, he could be just saying that I am from the household of David. I'm from that household which had the king David and King Solomon. So he could be from that household. Basically, he could have been, son of or something like wife number 100 or something like that. Or it could be related to that family. Or he could just be saying this for the poetic purpose. And there is no actual evidence that he was a King Solomon. In fact, the word Ecclesiastes itself, or original word, some of the original words, if we look at the translation, there would be Kohelet and so on, we would just realize that this just implies that this is sort of gathering of sayings, basically a bunch of. If somebody were to go online today and gather random quotes, this is sort of gathering of sayings, the book of Ecclesiastes. And let's start right now from one of the most interesting observations of this book, which is very philosophical. And I went back and saw all the oppression that is done under the sun, the tears of the oppressed who have none to console them. And from the hand of their violent oppressors there is none to console them. And I praise the dead who have already died more than the living who are still alive. And better than both is he who has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. And I saw all the toil and all the skill beats that is a man's enemy of his fellow. This too is a mere breath and herding the wind. Now, the last word. This too is a mere breath and herding a wind. This is like, he uses this very often in his work because he considers life pointless, because no matter who you are, like life could be unfair toward you in so many ways. And everything eventually goes to nothing and you still die, and he considers it very unfair. And he considers actually even more greater injustice when man gathers a lot of wealth and he is not able to enjoy it all and another enjoys it. Actually, he considers that even more bigger evil. But now let's focus on what I read. Now this is a very unusual sentence saying, because he pretty much says that I praise the dead, and people who are dead are in far more better situation than the ones who are still alive. And he doesn't even stop there, and he later continues this thought and says that, you know what, the luckiest is not the one who is alive or one who died. No, the one who has never been born in the first place. That is the luckiest. Because that person has not seen them life, and life is full of misery and pointlessness, and that person is the luckiest. And I envy that person. And I also think a lot about these words. In fact, I even wrote sort of a little big poetic stuff in Georgian about this, which basically sounds like this. Basically, which is kind of saying the same thing, but in Georgian, in much more poetic way, basically. Basically, what I just said in Georgian was that the dream of not being born, because the Ecclesiastes in this sentence generally, in this place, also wishes to not to be born. For his sort of dream is not to be born in the first place, because life is so unfair. And even thought he actually says another saying in different chapter where he says that it's far better to be alive and be a dog who is alive rather than being a dead lion. By the way, that saying is also very popular and often quoted, and is from this work. But also what he says about the oppression here. We live in right now during one of the largest wars in Europe, which still is going on between Ukraine and Russia, and we all know that Russia has invaded Ukraine last year, and millions of people are under oppression, and it's just civilians, mostly obviously Ukrainian civilians, are dying. In probably more than 200,000 Ukrainian civilians just have been killed at this point already. And numbers are not clear at this point because war is still going on. But just think about the ones who are alive, ones who have lost their homes, the ones who are under occupation, and etc. And the people who have lost their jobs and loved ones and so on. Their suffering is no less. And here we have his saying about the oppression. And I went back and saw all the oppression that is done under the sun, the tears of the oppressed who have none to console them, and from the hand of their violent oppressors there is none to console them. And when he sees this oppression, he is sort of disgusted by this oppression, by this life, and he's like, I praise the dead. They are in far better situation than ones who are alive, and even more enviable are the ones who have never been born in the first place, who have not witnessed this suffering. And later he goes on and says that if you see the oppression of the poor and the preservation of justice and right in the province, be not amazed at the moment, for he who is high has a higher one watching him, and still higher ones over them. Now this saying is sort of very mysterious, because he doesn't he could have, if he meant God, he could have just said God, like God is above them. But no, it just says very mysteriously somebody is watching over them too, like don't worry. Which is sort of mysterious, and it is up to interpretation. And generally, in the book of Ecclesiastes, we can clearly see his preference, what is his advice to us, and what he learned through his experience. And actually, he advises people not to read too much, because it will make you just unhappy and miserable, and there is no end to books and wisdom. Even though he still prefers wise and wisdom to fools and foolishness, and in fact in multiple times he insults fools and considers their laughter and their existence misery and pathetic, basically, and advises us to if we know somebody wise, make sure that we have contact with them, ask them questions, and etc. But at the same time, he concludes this by saying that you will be unhappy, and what privilege does a wise man have over a fool when both of them are going to die? And he's sort of horrified by the death, and he doesn't state anything specific about death. So his death is just die, and that's it. His death is sort of a Nietzschean death. Basically, after death there is nothing. He does not really say that something is going to happen. In fact, he goes far ahead and says that, the evil people are living a very good life, while the good people are oppressed, and that's it. And he basically says that if you can enjoy the love of a woman you love, and you can have access to good wine, and then enjoy those things, prefer those things, and these are the best things if circumstances allow you to have these things, to enjoy it, because everything is just hurting the wine and nothing really matters at the end of the day. This is sort of a conclusion he brings people. But obviously, at the end of the day, he still says that it's far better to be wise than to be a fool. But still questions the idea of death, and is okay, wise and foolish, both of them are going to die. And what's up with that? How is it fair? And obviously, he sees a very big unfairness in it. So yeah, as I've said, the sort of final advice of Ecclesiastes is to enjoy good food and wine and women one loves, if only the circumstances allow you it. Because again, circumstances are not predictable, and they are unpredictable. And there are many types of evil he pays attention to, and as I said already, the evil is that when one works hard, gathers the money, gathers the wealth, and he is incapable of enjoying it and dies, and somebody else enjoys it. And that is even more greater evil, because imagine from his standpoint and from ecclesiastical standpoint, imagine working hard, training your entire life, and finally going to that finish line, and instead of enjoying the fact that you won, you are on the finish line, you're just dying, and somebody else is taking your first place, and somebody else enjoying the fruits of your hard labor. That's sort of a next level evil. And apparently he has, if we believe him, he has witnessed a lot of things in life and found everything pretty much worthless, and everything sort of is herding wine. And no matter how much you learn, you still die. But at the end of the day, it is far better to be wise than to be a fool. But still, the death terrifies him. As well as, for example, where he says, better to hear the rebuke of the wise than a man hearing the song of fools. For like the sound of thorn beneath the pot, so is the laughter of the fools. Sort of, I already said this, but not this exact quotation, this way in exact quotation, but as we see here, he sort of says that, fools like to sort of laugh and have a fun, and their laughter, and to just ignore it, it's pointless. And in fact, he goes as far as to say that foolish man doesn't even know how to bless his own son, which is, by the way, as I've told you already, this book used to be my obsession. I probably read this book in Georgian language at least more than 50 times, and this is just my first time reading it in English, just for this video, and because I still have interest toward this book. And there are many things I remember in Georgian language about this book, but I cannot directly translate them because it's a very difficult thing, because of the language and difficulty, but I think I can still explain it. Because, if you think about it, this is such an interesting book, and such a tiny book, and you can just read it super fast. And it's just full of wisdom and sort of absurdism. It truly shows the people how pointless life is. How pointless, and how much suffering is really out there. Because if we say, think about his advice about wine, good food generally, women. Like this is like forms of escapism, right? So he did not say directly, but it's like these things can make your mind like focus on other thing. At least temporarily, you can forget this. They forget the oppressed ones and how justice only exists for the powerful, for the strong. Because at the end of the day, only powerful can really demand justice, and for the weak, and there is no justice for weak, and rarely that happens. And there is just so much pointless suffering, not only of humans but of animals, and like what we make out of this world is just so many things could be described as just mere breath and hurting the mind, and just it's for vanity's sake, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Um, and at the same time, just sort of to end this video, the last point is and by the way, last chapter of this book is very weird, as if it's written by also another person, just to make this book sort of part of Bible. This last chapter sort of was needed to make it for it to have sort of like seal of approval, so it could be included in Bible. So like it's very different. So if you like read this book, the book of Ecclesiastes all the time, you realize that like last chapter is especially weird, because like it sort of contradicts the thoughts of Ecclesiastes in previous chapters, and it's sort of a very different mindset in last chapter, as if it's just written for the sake of making this book. So as I've said, like a good book. So sort of like last chapter is sort of written as seal of approval. But again, in last chapter there is like, and remove worry from your heart, and take evil away from your flesh. For use and the time of vigor are mere breath. Now, what do you mean by evil? Like take evil away from your flesh? Well, like I don't know. Do you remember what we've all talked about before? Ecclesiastes is like, well, I've examined everything in life, my friend, and I'm telling you, good wine, good food, a woman one loves, and enjoy your wealth and do that things. And now here we read, take evil away from your flesh, for youth and the time of vigor are mere breath. I mean, time of vigor and youth. Is he talking about love here? Like Ecclesiastes would not have said this, because he literally told us that I've examined everything else and life is still pointless and there's suffering and misery, and if you're lucky enough and if you can afford these things, do these things. And suddenly we read again, and remove worry from your heart. Okay, this is sort of something Ecclesiastes would have said, but later when we read, and take evil away from your flesh. What is evil for the flesh? Is it wine? Is it good food? Is it woman? Or what does it mean? Because later it reads, for youth and the time of vigor are mere breath. So time of vigor and use, they use use usually. Do you mean women? Like what does this sentence mean? Because it does not seem like a stuff Ecclesiastes would say. And let's observe the ending part. And more than this, my son, be aware of making many books. There is no end. And much chatter is a weariness of the flesh. The last word all being heard. Fear God and keep his commands, for that is all humankind, since every deed will God bring to judgment, for every hidden act, be it good or evil. Well, this last sentence like gives feeling of could be mixed. Basically, some part is genuinely said by Ecclesiastes, because there is sort of a same thought here about many books and etc. He could have easily been bored by this wisdom again, because his three main advices: woman, one loves, good food, and wine. But in many times he doesn't mention God in previous chapters. He never mentions God in previous chapters this way, especially that God is going to bring these evil people in some sort of judgment. And the God is going to sort of bring justice to the oppressed people. He never really says it. In fact, he says that the evil just enjoy good life, and good people are just oppressed, and there is no hope for oppressed people, and they are just suffering, and that's it. He just says that everyone has the superior sort of. But as we already paid that sentence sort of attention, I said there that he could have said just God if he wanted to, but he didn't. So this is genuinely, obviously, very interesting book. And every time one reads it, you could probably observe something new. But overall, like, the book is very depressing. Like, there is no way you are reading this book and you are in like a good mood. The book is very depressing, and there are also a lot of contradictions, and there are a lot of legitimate questions, like what type of he never goes deeply, dwells deeply into it, but what type of God he's even talking about? Because I've heard some translators are talking about that the word in original texts, sort of Ecclesiastes using, is different. It is short, if I remember correctly, Elohim, and other Old Testament books, especially for God, or other names are used in etc. And generally there's this moment of like having this question toward Ecclesiastes, like, well, what is a God for you, and what type of God do you see, and how does he view the later concepts, or the general this existing concept of sort of will there be a judgment? Of course, the last last chapter talks about it, but in previous chapters there is nothing like that. He as I said, he says something like, of course this isn't really translation, but God created man to mock them, basically, because whatever the man does is pointless. It's sort of like curse of Sisyphus, like doing this pointless labor, and even if you are the smart and not a fool, you are still going to perish. And their evil is rampant everywhere, and everything is mere breath and hurting the mind, and it's sort of very contradicts this notion of some sort of a kind creator that created everything for purpose, and just, it's all human fault, because he really doesn't blame humans for everything. He just says that all people are oppressed, and there is no one who can save them from their oppression. And in fact, he even warns us that if you see oppression somewhere under the sun, like, do not even be surprised by that. So, in fact, he sort of advises us for society, in fact, if you don't see oppression, be surprised by that. But of course, this we could probably talk about, and I could probably talk about it much more in further videos. And next time I reread this work, or we could this book could have like even more detailed review. I'm sure there are books for that and etc. But so far, this is all I'm to say. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below, share what you think about the book of Ecclesiastes. What is your impression about the God of Ecclesiastes, sort of? If I were to give you some sort of questions, I want to hear your opinion. Would be like, what do you think? Comment down below, answer to this question. Like, what do you think? How does Ecclesiastes looks God? And the second question would be, who or what is ecclesiastical God, even, or does he even exist at all for Ecclesiastes?